Hello, welcome back. I know not many of you are viewing, but I hope to get more viewers and maybe some comments. I would really appreciate that. Today, I want to talk about my favorite supermodel, Gia Cirangi. Born in 1960, death in 1987. She was one of the most unique and talented supermodels of her time. She did amazing things. They called her the James Dean of the modeling industry back then because she was kind of masculine in her way. In certain lights, you almost thought that she had a boyish face, but in regular light, you could see her youth and innocence. And what was beautiful about her was the freckles underneath her eyes and her jaw and the intensity in her eyes. She had fire in her eyes. She had an amazing body. She always seemed to lean to one side when she was posing, and she had raindrop breasts and an amazing body to be captured on camera. She was a wild child. She certainly lived life to the fullest, and that's what we can really be happy about for her, is that in her time she did really incredible things and really lived life to the best of her ability. And she lived at Studio 54. She loved dancing and mingling, and she really had a great time, which I can relate to because I spent time clubbing in my early years. And it was so freeing for me after having been in an abusive relationship. And for her, she grew up in an abusive home. Her father was Italian, her mother was Irish Catholic, and he would yell and scream and abuse his wife, Kathleen. And his name was Joseph. And Kathleen wanted to be freed from it. She wanted to go out. She wanted to have a good time. She wanted to be treated nice. And she would. So Gia was often left alone without being able to really have a steady home life, something predictable, something with structure. She had three brothers, and she was the only girl, so she often craved the attention that her brothers would get, which I believe is what made her masculinity come about, being surrounded by four male figures. Kathleen ended up leaving the home, and Gia was left with just her brothers and her father, Joseph, and it was a tumultuous time for her. She didn't have a mother. And I can really relate to that because I lost my three children, and my oldest is a little girl. And she was left with her father, her two brothers, her stepbrother, and a stepsister. And she had to face being a tomboy and how difficult it was. Ultimately, she couldn't handle it and left the home. Well, my middle son was taken away by the state from my ex-husband, and my baby son is still left with him. And it's all a very sad story. But I can relate to what Gia went through, that kind of pain and anguish. I wouldn't know what was going on with my children, and I wouldn't know how to face it. I kept trying to get them back. I wanted to protect them, but there was nothing I could do. I felt helpless, and I believe that Gia felt helpless too. Although her mother entered her life again, she wasn't in the home. Gia was raised by her father, and it was all very difficult for her. It was painful, and it created a unstable identity. She didn't really know what to think of herself besides the fact that she wanted to be a masculine figure and became a lesbian. She ultimately had a lesbian relationship before she entered the modeling industry, and it it made her a very unique person back in that time because it wasn't that common to be a lesbian. She worshipped David Bowie, who would dress up as a female, and it was all very interesting how she portrayed herself because of her history. Um, that she was known to be promiscuous. She had different relationships, both male and female, and I can also relate to that. Although I've never been in a relationship with a female, I have had different relationships with male. I've had four male relationships, which I think is a lot, and I believe that the way she was portrayed in the movie, to just kiss anybody, I don't know if that's necessarily true. because in the books it's different, and in the interviews it's all different. They portray her as being in love with Sandy Lintern, that her relationship with Sandy Lintern was all that mattered. And Sandy Lintern would say, oh, Gia was her own worst enemy, that she she didn't really know how to be safe, I suppose. She was reckless, and she would do things that were out of control. But there was so much pressure on her to keep up with everything in the modeling industry in New York. I mean, New York moves at the speed of light, and there are so many pressures that I don't believe her mistakes should portray her. She was an amazing person. She was very intelligent. She wanted to be a cinema photographer after she became a model if she didn't get sick. And in a home interview, she kind of laughs at the photographer, a- asking him, "Did you just call me a boy?" And then she covers it up by saying, "Oh, most cinema photographers are boys." And she talks about her nerves being bad, so she twitches a lot, and I could see the health issues that she was facing at that point, with her inability to sit still, and her demeanor sort of changed from older interviews to that newer interview. But it was difficult times. I mean, the modeling industry in the movie, it seemed as though pressured her into what she had done. She was offered these drugs by professionals in the industry. It started out with just cocaine, and then it went to sniffing heroin. In the movie, they portray it like she wouldn't do needles until she was basically put in the position where she was so sick that she had to use a needle on the spot because that's all she could get her hands on. And although they portray that in the movie, I feel like the movie lies and doesn't really accurately describe her. It's more like she was just a mystery because the people who loved her most wanted to keep it a secret. And they didn't really want it to get out because they were afraid it would affect the business. Her father, Joseph, had a hoagie business, and he was, very successful, especially when she got sick with HIV and AIDS. He thought that if she had anything to do with the family, then it would affect his business. But ultimately, when she was sick for the last year of her life, and she was stayed alone in the motel in the motel room until she was put in the hospital, she had to face this alone. That kind of fear, what was going on in her head, the pain, the anguish. And no one was there for her. The modeling industry didn't even know that she died until a couple of years after her death. That's how much of a secret the family kept it. So I feel like the fact that she's a mystery shouldn't be. I feel like it should be revered what she went through. I mean, the HIV and AIDS epidemic was a huge thing back then. It was what I was born out of. I was born in 1984 during the epidemic, and she died 2 years after I was born. And I went through such dark times in my family then that I believe it would be comforting to know what she went through. So I would know what my family went through, because although it wasn't HIV and AIDS, my mother was a sick woman, and I was born out of HPV, and I had a heart murmur. And I know I suffered and had to heal from it, and I healed very quickly, and I was a lucky person. But ultimately, I've had to struggle with sickness, mental illness, and I know I've struggled with these things my whole life. And I don't believe that um, she should have had to suffer in her motel room all by herself. I believe that better things should have been for her. She really made something of herself, and it was just sad times. And the fact that people were keeping secrets and they couldn't share what they were going through because it was like it was a death sentence if you told the truth. I feel like that is what caused such chaos and confusion. And there's still chaos and confusion. There's a heroin epidemic now because of all the sickness. And people have to suffer in silence. How many girls have I known to die from this heroin epidemic? And she didn't die from the heroin epidemic. She died from intravenous HIV and AIDS. But I believe that it should be known, people should be aware, because maybe there would be less people suffering if they knew how strong you could really be. And ultimately, when she left New York City, she went to go work at the hoagie shop in Atlantic City, and she accidentally prostituted herself, and she was raped, and she was beaten, and she went through such horrible things. When people knew who she was, knew the success she had made, and people didn't even feel for her. Why? Because she made a few wrong choices. She was pressured in a society that doesn't care about the outcome. Ultimately, in the movie, they would portray it like doing heroin worked for her because it would give her death underneath the eyes. And that look, that smoldering, dark look, was what they wanted from her. Raw meat is what they called it in the movie. And I believe that her youthful, beautiful look was destroyed because of what they did. She had such an amazing, amazing young way about her, even up to her death. She still would fight to be able to be herself. And I don't believe that she should have gone through that. They portray it like she had to have a closed casket, and because of the deterioration and her hair falling out. And I can really relate to that because I was cheated on and my hair started to fall out. And what I went through, the judgment and the pain and anguish growing it back, I, I, I don't feel like I can even confront society about what I went through, but I am anyways, because I think it's the bravest thing that someone can do when they're going through something like that, is to tell the story and to talk about their suffering and to talk about their strength anyways. And it's unfair to believe that she should have had to have kept it a secret the way she did. Um, Her relationship with Sandy Lintern was a beautiful one. She was a lesbian. What lesbian is known to catch HIV and AIDS when she was one of the first women in Philadelphia to be found with HIV and AIDS? And that is a documentation of history in itself. The fact that she was that woman to go through that. And I wish that people didn't keep her such a mystery. I wish the movie didn't portray her in a way that wasn't exactly true. They make Angelina Jolie have this wild hairdo, and I never hear about Gia having anything but thick, beautiful hair. And they say she wouldn't sit still in front of the camera, that she didn't like being photographed, which I believe because she stated that she wanted to be a cinematographer. And ultimately, her and Sandy Lintern were supposedly a tumultuous relationship. Sandy Lintern was straight when Gia was a lesbian, and maybe Sandy enjoyed being a lesbian, but when Gia claims in the movie that Sandy is her soulmate, I believe that, I don't know, Sandy looked at her that way. But Sandy would say that Gia was in the spotlight and she wanted to stick by her, even though Gia was in the spotlight. But you see it in the home video of them where they're dancing, that Gia was like, "No, look at Sandy. Look how beautiful Sandy is." And Sandy was beautiful. And it's a tragedy that it's portrayed like, oh, Gia was in the spotlight, not Sandy Lintern. Sandy Lintern has so many interviews and is very famous for Gia's death. And I know that while Gia was alive, she wanted to make it out like, look, Sandy is in the spotlight as well. She is my girlfriend. And it was a huge deal back then. Being a lesbian was not common. They called her the lesbian carnival ride. When she went to New York, she supposedly went with her mother, but in the movie they portray it like she went to New York all by herself. I know that she lived in New York by herself and that she struggled by herself and she did so many things by herself. And I don't like that it's unknown what really happened. it makes me sad that it's only portrayed in a movie. I mean, the modeling industry supposedly rejected her, and that's how she ended up a prostitute in Atlantic City. When they were the one handing her the drugs in the first place, they knew about the drugs. Even her dad would say, "I knew about the drugs," in the movie, anyways. But I basically wanted to share that because I'm obsessed with her. I love her. If I were going to be a lesbian, which I would want to, I would believe that I would love someone like her. In the light, depending on what way her face is looked at, she can look kind of masculine or feminine, as though she's androgynous. That's what I would want to call her, as androgynous, not a lesbian. And it was really incredible, her look and her raindrop breasts on that face. What an amazing combination. The body, what an amazing combination. I know I talked to her spiritually. That's why I've watched all her videos and began to read both of her books that are written about her, and watch the movie. And I study her pictures. I feel like we looked alike from age 1 through 4. I was born 2 years after her death, so I suppose um, it could happen that I could look like her at that time. People, it seems like when people are born at certain times, then that's how they all kind of look similar. And she was a beautiful person. And since I talked to her spiritually, I wanted to share a tarot card reading with you. I wanted to do a 1 card spread to ask about how Gia is doing, if she's in a happy place, if she's doing something that she loves, because that's what she really wanted to do with her life, was something that she loves, like cinematography. And I want a movie myself. I'm working on a blog that I have to copyright because I'm afraid people will steal my story. I'm afraid that I'll just quit because I can't afford to copyright yet. But that's what happens when you have borderline personality disorder, is you end up not having relationships or connections, and you don't really know how to reach the people necessary to share your story. People ask me what would I do if I could share my story. I would want to liberate people by advocating for the the mental illness and the epidemics and the children, and it would be something that would be really important to me because I wouldn't want other people to suffer the way Gia did or the way I have. And I'm going to do the tarot card reading now. I'm just lighting 1 candle to contact the spirits. It's a 1 card spread, so I only want 1 candle. And I'm going to shuffle. Okay, now that the cards are shuffled, I'm going to ask, how is Gia doing? Is she in a happy place? Is she working on something that she loves? If it's heaven, does she have a place in heaven? She's not stuck in limbo, is she? And what's going on? I got the Ace of Wands. Wands is a beautiful card. It represents magic, and it looks like the ace is some kind of fairy, and she's holding a baby, which I think could represent birth of something magical. And it's underneath the moon, as most of the cards are, because I believe that we are all guided by nature. Just like there's trees over her head, And I hope that means that she is with me because I'm out with the trees. I live out in a small town. I would call it the middle of nowhere, but it's just a small town. And then the wand has a fire at the top of it as though something is still burning alive. And hopefully that means that Gia's memory is very alive. Now I'll tell you the story of the card. The Ace of Wands heralds the beginning of all is good as she cradles new life in her arms. Her massive torch is prepared to spread its fire throughout the woods, igniting minds with creativity and passion. Which is exactly what Gia was, creative and passionate. She was such a beautiful soul. So hopefully that's what she's doing spiritually, is igniting creativity and passion. And I believe that to be true. This is the card that I just read. Creativity, passionate love, which is what she had. She had passionate love. I guess that represents the baby, the passionate love. And I said giving birth to something new, which apparently would be creative and passionate. And new life, potential, good things about to begin. So perhaps, my spiritual connection with her, I get to have her creativity within me, and I believe that she's with me at all times. And since it's a positive card, I know she's in a happy place. I know she's in a magical place. I know that she's giving birth to something beautiful with her spiritual life in the afterlife. Ultimately, I know that she's done great things for me. She's kept my hope alive, knowing that all her struggles would help me understand that bad things can happen to good people, and that there's hope alive in this world for all of us, and that we are not alone. Creative souls often feel alone, and I don't believe that we have to. I believe that we can feel like there's something new and bigger out there for all of us at all times. And I believe that Gia, I would diagnose her myself, that Gia had borderline personality disorder, and is just in her reckless, impulsive way. Supposedly, she tried to break into Sandy Lintern's apartment when she wouldn't let her in, because her profound love for Sandy made her want to reach her no matter what and not be abandoned. Borderline personality disorder sufferers often have such a fear of abandonment that they would go to any lengths not to be abandoned. And I can't wait to finish her 2 books. I've gotten most of the way through, and it's really impressive. I think there should be more released about her because she has made such a profound impact on my life that she is my role model in so many ways. Not the role model, but one of my role models. And I don't believe she should have died the way that she did. She really tried her hardest not to go that way. And rehab was supposed to protect her. She checked an antigen though. She had no security. Even though she had parents, she had no security. And, people really need support in their lives to make it through when they suffer from borderline personality disorder. And ultimately, her demise was her being raped and beaten. I mean, she was in a place where she was so weak, and someone would prey on her even though she had accomplished so much. And I can't believe we live in a world today where people prey on victims. And I really feel for that because I've been preyed upon, I've been cheated on, I've been abused, and I've been a victim in my life. I haven't been completely innocent, but I've been a victim in my life. And just like her as a child, I suffered from abuse and just horrible, unstable, unstructured ways in the home. They were allowed to do whatever they wanted as kids, and so was I. And that's not how children should be raised. Children need to be told what to do, children need to be guided. And I believe thoroughly that I would advocate for children to be protected at all times. Thank you for listening. I hope that you comment or view or like, even. I say that in a manner of like I wouldn't get any likes. I have a real fear of rejection, so I just kind of tell myself the worst. But thank you so much for listening. Much love.